Okay, that leads us nicely onto the January transfer window then, and no striker signed, no player signed at all. Obviously, we've come off the high, and it seems to be strange to go straight talking about this after you scored 5 goals against Man City. Only Liverpool scored more in the Premier League this season, but it's that thing we've been talking about a lot this season that you don't need the striker for those 5-1 games, do you? You need them for the other games that you might struggle to find the breakthrough in. I mean, the strange thing for me was that Arteta came out and said they need a player, they need a striker, but there was a lack of links, even lack of speculation. There was Watkins was briefly flirted with, Matthias Tell on the towards the end of the transfer window, along with most other big Premier League clubs, but they were linked with him. But just nothing ever seemed to get off the ground, ever seemed particularly likely, and they leave themselves pretty vulnerable.
No, very vulnerable, not pretty vulnerable, very vulnerable. I mean, basically, Kai Havertz must be sitting there today looking at the fixture list and thinking, oh my God, these next 3 months are going to absolutely kill me, because he's going to have to play pretty much every single game. There's no other striker. You can play Trossard there, and I'm sure he will at some points play Trossard there when he attempts to give Havertz a bit of a breather. But, it's Arteta couldn't have made it any clearer during the window. He wanted another signing. He absolutely wanted help. He kept saying it, we need help. And that's the key thing for me here, is it didn't necessarily have to be an out-and-out starter number 9. It just needed a bit of help for these players, because they're weaker now than they were when they started the transfer window. And they were weak up front, when they started, but they've lost Jesus since then. So they're weak. They've got weaker options now than they had then. And you just worry about the amount of minutes and the amount of loads. And if you want to get the best out of the players you've got now for the remainder of the season, really crunch time in the season, they've got to be, fit. Not 100%, because I don't think many players ever are, but, still at a sort of fitness level where they can perform at their very best. But if you're running players into the ground and they're playing every single game and pretty much every single minute, it's very hard to maintain that level. And that's why when you talk about helping these players, you just need to be able to give them a breather at times to be able to maintain that top level. And that's my big worry here. I can understand, and from the club's point of view, from conversations I've had, it's like, well, fixture congestion now we've got over the worst of it. It's until the Champions League starts up again, it's a game a week now. It's not what we've been going through for the last 6 weeks. As I said, Ranieri's emerged as a bit of a goal getter. Now Saka, hopefully, maybe March, he'll be back. We saw him at the game at the weekend. He looked pretty good on the touchline from what you can make of that. But and so they're looking at it like that, and they've very much got their plans in place for the summer, and they were very wary of if they did something now, that was going to really impact them in the summer. And if they couldn't get someone they really wanted to sign now, then they were like, well, we're not going to do it. We are going to wait for the summer. It's a gamble. It's a massive gamble. No doubt about it. I think it's more, I look at it more as the mistakes from the summer. I can understand it in a way because January is so difficult, but it's just, it keeps going back to the failings of the summer and not get, basically having to just scramble around and get Sterling on the last day of the summer window just to sort of help the attack out. That was where it was wrong. The summer, they needed to get stuff done in the summer. It was very, very clear. And they've left themselves short. And I think this window is just kind of rubber stamped that a little bit. And it's a gamble, absolute gamble. And they've only got themselves to blame if it comes back to bite them. If Kai Havertz gets injured tomorrow, for example, at Newcastle, touch wood, that doesn't happen. But if he does, and he's out for any significant period of time, they've only got themselves to blame for the fallout that will come from that.
And who bears the brunt of that blame? I did wonder whether Edu's unexpected exit maybe had a knock-on effect on January and the planning. But from what you're saying, the issues go further back than that. Who bears the brunt of that blame? Because Arteta seems to have been knocking on the door and asking for people. Is there mistrust in the board from the fans, or are they sort of at a level where you can trust that they haven't moved because the right person didn't become available at a reasonable price? Is there any way to be important?
I think it's split, fairly split in terms of fans. Well, maybe not. I think there's definitely, certainly today anyway, and the immediate fallout from it, there's a real frustration. You can sense it from the fans of, the owners haven't done enough and that they're willing to accept just a top 4 finish, and they're not showing enough ambition to really go for trophies and all that. And we haven't really heard that for a while. When the Kroenkes came in, there was a lot of distrust about them, and quite rightly so, to be honest, in terms of how they were operating. But certainly since Arteta was installed and that partnership with Edu, you didn't really hear the disquiet about the owners too much, but that's certainly come back on the back of this window, and the summer a little bit, but certainly on the back of this window. And so who bears the brunt? I don't know. It's a collective at Arsenal. It is. I don't think Edu's departure would have helped. It put Jason Ito in a difficult situation going into this window. but I wouldn't lay the blame on his door, really. I think if deals were there to be done, I'm sure he would have been able to. But ultimately, the club felt that they didn't want to push and go too far for a player that they just didn't think the value. I mean, like Ollie Watkins, for example, they were willing to go to a certain sort of figure for him, but they weren't willing to go to a figure that would have really tempted Villa to potentially do that. And that's kind of how they approached the window. It's like they had a number in mind, maybe for a player or players, and if they couldn't get that, they were willing to gamble or whatever and just wait for the summer. So ultimately, again, with all these things, you just got to wait till the end of the season to see how it's going to pan out. And if Arsenal fall short, if they get injuries, then, as I said, the club are going to have to accept responsibility for a lack of dealings over the last 2 windows in attack.